Day after day, regular as clockwork, from the occupation of Kabul onwards, a succession of surreal interviews is inflicted upon us by various TV stations, in which Taliban 2.0, with a neat beard and good if not excellent English, reassured the whole continent and Americans that the watchword of the new Islamic Emirate of Afghanistan will be inclusiveness.
And of course it is going to be an inclusive system.
Just like watching the 10th dystopian episode of South Park, Abdul Kahar Balkhi explains to Al Jazeera how the government that is forming in Kabul aims to be inclusive.
Making a joint and inclusive government.
And how the hysteria that has taken hold amongst Afghans on the run from what has been presented as the best possible theocracies in the world is completely unfounded.
I think it would have been much better because we have announced general amnesty for everyone, the security forces from senior to the junior level. And this fear or this hysteria that has taken place is unfounded.
Is unfounded.
Meanwhile, from the liberal BBC, other Taliban reassure the free world that they are investigating the massacre of 9 Hazara men in the province of Ghazni.
Amnesty International has said that the Taliban are responsible for brutal massacres of Hazara men in Ghazni. And so the Taliban is saying there won't be any revenge attacks, there won't be any reprisals, but we're also hearing about these sorts of reports. Can you tell us what you know about it?
No, I doubt the veracity of those reports because our policy is clear. If there is any incident, it is brought to attention of authorities. It is fully investigated, and any culprit who is behind such incident is prosecuted and brought to justice and punished. So our policy in this case very clear.
Following the complaint launched by Amnesty International, we can all very well depict a bunch of Bedouins sitting on a carpet in the shade of a blossoming almond tree, carefully consult the flight of pelicans in the sky to eventually confirm their suspicions. Taliban are to be unconditionally acquitted.
After examining the bills, the Judicial Assembly gathers outside. In the areas they control, the Taliban have established local courts known for their rapid resolution of cases.
Where are the files? Someone bring them to me.
Human trafficking, oppression of women and LGBT people, torture and violence against civilians, restrictions of modern education, bans on entertainment and recreational activities, kidnapping of political opponents, cultural genocide. No. Again, when the BBC has a chance to interview a Taliban, what comes in mind to them is nothing of the above, but all about inclusiveness.
Now comes the hardest part of all, moving from an insurgency to a government. She asked Sher Abbas Staniksai whether the new government would be inclusive and would include women.
This is all fine, but what if instead of worrying about loony woke issues, we start from the basics, such as asking what happened to comedian Kashnat Svan, who has been slapped and harassed at gunpoint by a group of armed men just ahead of his killing for making jokes about Islam on their Want to Be Inclusive Taliban watch.
And the Taliban has taken responsibility for the killing of a comedian in the country. Last week, viral videos emerged showing Nizar Mohammed with his hands tied behind his back and sitting between two men in a car being slapped repeatedly. A Taliban spokesperson has claimed that Mohammed was an active policeman and responsible for the deaths of many people. The police refute this claim and say that the comic was never deployed in combat and was more of an entertainer for the checkpoints officers. The terrorists had initially denied they had anything to do with his murder until the videos went viral. Mohammed was popular for his comic routines on social media and was known for his jokes and funny songs.
Or if we want to stay on women's issues, what about investigating whether women will still get an education and their basic human rights guaranteed under a Taliban government before asking about their representation in politics? Now, between here and thousands of girls finally relieved of the burden of studying maths and science, and adult women freed in inclusive beach-colored burqas, let's get ready in the West to memorize the exotic names of a new class of Taliban spokespersons. Beware, they are all male, cisgender, and straight. But in this case, it's going to be alright. As long as it don't show any sign of whiteness to snowflakes millennials.
Take your shirt of your choice and tie it around your head like this.
Soon, live on TV from the studios of The Daily Show with a Starbucks cup in hand, Taliban will explain to us that the news about the cutthroat opium growers from the Margo Desert we were used to receive over the last 20 years were all fake news. In fact, why shall they continue to sell opium when lithium will save the world from global warming, becoming one of the most crucial halal crusades that all worthy vegan Taliban will fight for in the years to come? And why persisting in using backlogs and machetes nowadays and running the risk of looking like barbarian lunatics when American Democrats on the run generously loan $83 billion in armaments to the oppressed Taliban minority, with which the Taliban can finally shoot the Afghan crowd in a much more inclusive way. On the one hand, we can be sure that in the West, we will continue like nothing happens, to proudly show off to the rest of the world how progressive and inclusive we are. We will clean up our various Facebook, Twitter, self-proclaimed liberal media outlets and newspapers of all those forbidden words, images and opinions from blasphemous politics, writers, journalists, artists and cartoonists who insist on the crime of vilifying the religion of identity politics, multiculturalism, inclusive language and political correctness. On the other hand, on the other side of the planet, in the East, China, Russia, Iran, Qatar and Turkey will keep feeding less and less starving ex-Bedouins of the desert and buying all the lithium they can from them to make sure that if you don't learn Chinese in the next 10 years, you will count nothing.
很糟糕，但是我的天，试一试用中文。我可能需要练习。
What about the Afghans in all this? The poor people have begun to flee, or at least they are trying to escape a country which has been shamelessly betrayed and abandoned by their Western allies. And to those few who will manage to cross the borders of what is still dubbed the free world, I'd like to kindly ask you a favor. Once you're here, could you please be so kind to enlighten the woke brigade on how to reset their priorities straight? Perhaps you could start by asking simple questions such as, how can you upload tech gurus from the Silicon Valley for banning Advitam Outkulpam, a former president of one of your free countries, and at the same time still allowing one of the most conservative and violent Islamist groups on the planet to have their spokesman freely chirping their truth, as Saint Oprah would preach on Twitter.
Speaking your truth is the most powerful tool we all have.
But we can be sure that they will invent a new derogatory epithet to discredit and label you as unconsciously subservient of the evil capitalist West.
No, say it's
Ew, he's a capitalist! Ew! Ew! Get out of here!
Such as Uncle Mohammed or Brother Tom.